into the tower.
Something relatively devastating happening this morning there.
It's a beautiful day, as you probably, you yourself probably recall. It was a fall day, September 11th, and it was a day that I remember I celebrated the Chinese Mass here, the 8 o'clock Mass, and then I went to cast my vote. It was a mayoral primary election around the corner, a couple around the corner. And I went to cast the vote, and I came back, and the staff, which was mostly the same staff as here now, they said that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. The priests from the parish closer to the World Trade Center called and said, they're going to need some priests down here because there's going to be a lot of people who are wounded, and they're going to need some pastoral care. So I started to gather the holy oils and my stole and things like that to go down to, which was going to be a real catastrophe, that happened. And while I was doing that, we watched on the TV, we saw the second plane hit. And everything changed. No longer was this an accident. I was going down to an attack on New York City. I went down to where the Millennium Hotel is. It faces the North and the South Tower. And there was a triage center there of ambulances and people getting people together. And I just put my stole on and stopped there, and people just started to come to me because they just saw a priest. It's interesting, and I think half of them, or most of them, weren't even Catholic. It's just that people were so upset about what's happening, why is this happening, who's doing this, what happened to this beautiful morning that we started off with. During that time, there were also pieces of metal and things coming down from the building, hitting here and hitting there. It's interesting. I think it's the grace of God and the adrenaline that God makes go. That you don't run from it, but and you were protected. I was protected, by God. All of a sudden we heard a big crack, a big noise, and what had happened was we were to look up to our left, and even though I was outside of the North Tower, the South Tower was collapsing. And what you could see when you looked up is that probably the top 20 stories of the tower were coming down towards us, but the rest of it was just folding down like an accordion. And I turned to run, and I only got probably just across the street from where the hotel is in the corner, and I put my hands on the gate of the St. Paul's church in the back, the yard of the gate. And but that just made it at that time, and all of the debris from the building came down, and we were covered, and some people grabbed onto my legs. So for a period of time, probably 10, 12 minutes, we were totally covered there and in the dark and silence, and it was very, very difficult to breathe in that situation. But we were able in some way to climb out of that and to clear ourselves, and I found myself, my nose was bleeding, I think my ears were bleeding and things like that, but you didn't think about that. So as soon as we got out, at least I did, and I started to look around, and the ambulance was crushed and all the things were crushed in people. And there was a police officer who was getting up out of the street. He was also covered. And he said to us, he said, get out of here, get out of here. He says, the next building might collapse. Well, who would have thought, who would have thought this building would collapse? You don't think that the second building is going to collapse. And luckily, God's grace, we started to turn and walk towards Broadway. By the time I did get to Broadway, that building did collapse. And the impact was so great that the rush of air and everything pushed me out to Broadway. So he saved my life, and he saved the lives of several of us who were just walking around trying to be helpful to see if we could see anybody from the first collapse. Figured I'd walk back to Chinatown, and it was chaos. People were running, people not knowing what to do. Then when I turned the corner and came in the front gate, the children from the school were being evacuated. And when they came out and they saw me, many of them, the children screamed, and they were in horror at seeing me. And that's when I think I broke down too, to see the little children screaming, and because they didn't realize what had happened. So I immediately went upstairs and I changed, and that's the time when I found, on my clothes there was a lot of burnt flesh, because all those people I was holding came to me during that initial time down there. You don't even realize. And I also still have the oils in my hand, which is something, you know, you take your, to give the sacrament of the sick, you make the sign of the cross with the oil, so you have your thumb in the oil. And I still have the oil in my hand. Don't ask me how or why, it's just that I was probably stunned from that time. What was most rewarding for that time, given the circumstances, of course, we say the presence of God in the face of evil, is the amount of people who came down to help, and the amount of people who not just came down to help in that situation, but I think if you were here in New York, all of New York changed. Everyone was courteous and loving and considerate for a long period of time, because we knew that it wasn't just Chinatown or Transfiguration Parish or me who was wounded. The whole country was wounded, and people were wounded on different levels. It's something you never thought could ever happen. You could never even imagine this happening. And when it did happen, the response of people was so positive and so giving, and the tragedy was so lasting. And it's something I think that somebody like myself, will never forget it.